Okay, yesterday was the first part of the first 2020 Democratic presidential debate. It was very interesting, some clear winners and losers, several cringe moments, which we'll talk about. I live streamed it on our YouTube channel last night. We'll be live streaming again tonight for part two, assuming that our live streaming privileges are not taken away, which is happening to some YouTubers who streamed yesterday's debate. Not going to get into that now. But to reset, Elizabeth Warren was the only frontrunner in the first night. The others, Biden, Bernie, Buttigieg, Harris, all in tonight's second part, along with Andrew Yang, which will be interesting. Now, unfortunately, and not super surprisingly, a lot of questions simply weren't answered. Some weren't answered in particularly pandering ways, which I'll talk about. But overall, there were some winners in this debate, but it was not a good debate in the sense that in terms of discourse and depth, it was a disaster. Part of this is just the number of candidates on stage. Part of this is the format. Because of the number of candidates on stage, answers were 1 minute and rebuttals were 30 seconds. Not everybody got to answer every question. Not everybody got to rebut every answer. And my impression overall is that the three people who did the best were Elizabeth Warren, Bill de Blasio, and Julian Castro, who I would say won the debate in terms of substance and style. Now, that doesn't mean I agree with all of their positions. This is not me saying I'm endorsing them. This is simply evaluating only their performance in yesterday's debate. Of course, Bill de Blasio has no chance of being the nominee, and Julian Castro has almost no chance of being the nominee. Warren, polling at about 13% heading into the debate, won because she said the right things and she said them in the right way, period. She got good questions also that lined up with her issues and answered the questions really well. Here's one example.
But this comes at a time when 71% of Americans say the economy is doing well, including 60% of Democrats. What do you say to those who worry this kind of significant change could be risky to the economy?
So I think of it this way. Who is this economy really working for? It's doing great for a thinner and thinner slice at the top. It's doing great for giant drug companies. It's just not doing great for people who are trying to get a prescription filled. It's doing great for people who want to invest in private prisons, just not for the African Americans and Latinx whose families are torn apart, whose lives are destroyed, and whose communities are ruined. It's doing great for giant oil companies that want to drill everywhere, just not for the rest of us who are watching climate change bear down upon us. When you've got a government, when you've got an economy that does great for those with money and isn't doing great for everyone else, that is corruption, pure and simple. We need to call it out, we need to attack it head on, and we need to make structural change in our government, in our economy, and in our country.
So there's actually relatively little to talk about with Warren in that she overperformed compared to some past debates. She got good questions that were in her wheelhouse, just did a good job overall. And we'll see how her polling reacts. Bill de Blasio, basically polling zero, the mayor of New York City, has no chance. But he actually did well in this debate because some of the people on the stage wanted to sort of play coy with, are you in favor of this or not? Or trying to have their cake and eat it too, in the sense of claiming to be progressive without actually having to say, yes, we need free college. Yes, we need Medicare for all. And Bill de Blasio was aggressive in a respectful way, and he had some great moments. Here's just one example of that.
But let me tell you, what we're hearing here already in the first round of questions is that battle for the heart and soul of our party. I want to make it clear. This is supposed to be the party of working people. Yes, we're supposed to be for a 70% tax rate on the wealthy. Yes, we're supposed to be for free college, free public college for our young people. We are supposed to break up big corporations when they're not serving our democracy. This Democratic Party has to be strong and bold and progressive. And in New York, we've proven that we can do something very different. We can put money back in the hands of working people. And let me tell you, every time you talk about investing in people and their communities, you hear folks say there's not enough money. What I say to them every single time is there's plenty of money in this world. There's plenty of money in this country. It's just in the wrong hands. We Democrats have to fix that.
This is not a de Blasio endorsement. It's recognizing that he did well for the format and for this debate, even though he's still going to be polling very little. His performance was the second best for me. And then in third place, it was Julian Castro. He was helped a lot by the immigration crisis at the border because it pushed the topic into the debate in a serious way. He genuinely knows a lot about this issue. He was able to talk about it in depth with Cory Booker, with Beto O'Rourke, and appear really strong because he is strong on this issue. Let's take a look at one clip.
Thank you very much, Jose. I'm very proud that in April I became the first candidate to put forward a comprehensive immigration plan. And we saw those images, watching that image of Oscar and his daughter Valeria is heartbreaking. It should also piss us all off. If I were president today, and it should spur us to action, if I were president today, I would sign an executive order that would get rid of Trump's zero tolerance policy, the Remain in Mexico policy, and the metering policy. This metering policy is basically what prompted Oscar and Valeria to make that risky swim across the river. They have been playing games with people who are coming and trying to seek asylum at our ports of entry. Oscar and Valeria went to a port of entry, and then they were denied the ability to make an asylum claim. So they got frustrated, and they tried to cross the river, and they died because of that.
On day one, sorry.
On day one, I would do that executive order that would address metering, and then I would follow that up in my first 100 days with immigration reform that would honor asylum claims, that would put undocumented immigrants, as long as they haven't committed a serious crime, on a pathway to citizenship, and then would go to the root cause of the issue, which is we need a Marshall Plan for Honduras and Guatemala and El Salvador, so that people can find safety and opportunity at home instead of coming to the United States to seek it.
And then later on the same issue, going back and forth with Beto O'Rourke, who was saying a lot, but making very few points. Take a look at this.
Free dreamers forever from any fear of deportation by making them U.S. citizens here in this country. Invest in solutions in Central America, work with regional stakeholders so there's no reason to make that 2,000-mile journey to this country.
Secretary, I'll give you 30 seconds.
Let's be very clear. The reason that they're separating these little children from their families is that they're using Section 1325 of that act, which criminalizes coming across the border, to incarcerate the parents and then separate them. Some of us on this stage have called to end that section, to terminate it. Some, like Congressman O'Rourke, have not. And I want to challenge all of the candidates to do that. I just think it's a mistake, Beto. I think it's a mistake. And I think that if you truly want to change the system, then we got to repeal that section. If not, then it might as well be the same policy.
Let me respond to this very briefly. Actually, as a member of Congress, I helped to introduce legislation that would ensure that we don't criminalize those who are seeking asylum and refuge in this country. If you're fleeing desperation, then I want to make sure that you're treated with respect.
I'm still talking about everybody else.
But you're looking at just one small part of this. I'm talking about a comprehensive rewrite of our immigration laws.
That's not true.
And if we do that, I don't think it's asking too much for people to follow our laws when they come to this country. I'm talking about millions of folks. A lot of folks that are coming are not seeking asylum. A lot of them are undocumented immigrants, right? And you said recently that the reason you didn't want to repeal Section 1325 was because you were concerned about human trafficking and drug trafficking. But let me tell you what. Section 18, Title 18 of the U.S. Code, Title 21, and Title 22 already cover human trafficking. I think that you should do your homework on this issue. If you did your homework on this issue, you would know that we should repeal this section.
Again, if immigration ended up not being a part of yesterday's debate, Castro probably bombs and is a non-factor, but he did really well because he's super strong on this issue, and really others' knowledge of the issue visibly paled in comparison to Julian Castro's. Elizabeth Warren's worst moment was on guns, just sort of bumbling and mumbling without really saying very much and repeating that we should do research a couple of times. Tulsi Gabbard had one good answer at the end about getting out of Afghanistan, otherwise not much of a factor. She really benefited from Tim Ryan just saying boneheadedly dumb things about 9/11 and foreign policy, which let Gabbard come in and make him look very stupid on that issue. And as far as the attacks that we saw between candidates, other than Julian Castro going after Beto for his position on immigration, almost every attack was from Bill de Blasio. De Blasio went right after everyone saying, hey, let's just say we're for progressive ideas if we actually claim to be progressive. De Blasio with a really great call out of Beto O'Rourke at one point. De Blasio talking about immigrants didn't do this to you. Huge corporations did, which was a very good moment for de Blasio. De Blasio was specific on when we should or shouldn't intervene in other countries and the importance of actually having authorized war powers for a president making those decisions. Some of the disagreements were, Klobuchar is less into free college than Warren, at least not in as wide-ranging of a way. The disagreement I already told you about between Castro and Beto, and Castro and Cory Booker on some immigration specifics. Interestingly, on healthcare, only Elizabeth Warren and Bill de Blasio raised their hands when asked, do you want to replace private healthcare with a government-run program? This was a crazy moment because it made no sense that of all the people on the stage, only Warren and de Blasio raised their hands in this moment I'm going to play. But it also was a terribly asked question, which should have been called out. Take a look.
We're going to turn to the issue of health care right now and really try to understand where there may or may not be daylight between you. Many people watching at home have health insurance coverage through their employer. Who here would abolish their private health insurance in favor of a government-run plan? Just a show of hands, start off with. All right, well.
So only Bill de Blasio and Warren put their hands up. This is a concern. I mean, there should be other hands up, but the question was asked horribly. The exact wording from Lester Holt was, who here would abolish their private health insurance in favor of a government-run plan? Show of hands to start off with. He didn't say who would make private insurance illegal. He said who would abolish their private health insurance. So he's asking who would choose to cancel their own insurance and instead get a government plan, was the way I understood the meaning of the question. But clearly some people on the stage interpreted as who here wants to make private insurance illegal, which is a terrible moment because that's a right-wing talking point that has been spreading, right? I mean, it did hurt some of those who didn't put their hands up, but I wish someone had just called out the question and said, wait a second, Lester, I want the government involved and I want private insurance to be irrelevant, but I'm not talking about making it illegal other than maybe as a thought experiment. That's a right-wing talking point meant to interfere with serious discussions. We want people not to need private insurance. It's not about making it illegal. And instead, everybody ended up answering the question sort of as they understood it. And it really was a mess. And then lastly, the big losers were John Delaney, bizarre answer after bizarre answer, Tim Ryan, who made a fool out of himself, and Beto O'Rourke. Beto's worst moment when he was asked, what do you think the top marginal tax rate should be? And he broke into incorrect Spanish. This is my stream and my reaction to it in real time.
Some Democrats want a marginal individual tax rate of 70% on the very highest earners, those making more than $10 million a year.
Let's talk rates.
Would you support that? And if not, what would your top individual rate be?
This economy has got to work for everyone. And right now we know that it isn't. And it's going to take all of us coming together to make sure that it does.
Give us a number.
Necesitamos incluir cada persona en el éxito de esta economía. Pero si queremos hacer eso, necesitamos incluir cada persona en nuestra democracia. Cada votante,
I mean, if you're going to do it, you got to speak Spanish correctly.
Y cada voz necesitamos escuchar. Right now, we have a system that favors those who can pay for access and outcomes. That's how you explain an economy that is rigged to corporations and to the very wealthiest. A $2 trillion tax cut that favored corporations while they were sitting on record piles of cash, and the very wealthiest in this country at a time of historic wealth inequality. A new democracy that is revived because we return power to the people. No PACs, no gerrymandering, automatic and same-day voter registration to bring in more voters, and a new Voting Rights Act to get rid of the barriers that are in place now. That's how we each have a voice in our democracy and make this economy work for everybody.
Disaster.
That's time, sir.
So he said este economía, and he said nuestra democracia. So in Spanish, words have gender. So like if I say professor, if I say profesor, that's a male professor. If I say profesora, that's a female professor. And when Beto O'Rourke said este economía, he should have said esta economía. When he said nuestra democracia, he should have said nuestra democracia. But the problem isn't speaking Spanish per se, and it's not that he spoke incorrect Spanish. It was so obviously a concocted and planned moment. He's asked for the marginal tax rate, and he speaks Spanish. And I got emails from people saying, David, don't tell Hispanic immigrants how they should feel about what Beto did. Maybe they liked it. I'm an immigrant from Argentina. I speak Spanish at home. Hearing Robert O'Rourke struggle through incorrect Spanish to not answer a question, which I would have loved an answer to. What should the top marginal tax rate be? It's just a turnoff, and it felt like such total pandering. So a bad night for Beto. Here's how I scored it, so to speak. I believe Elizabeth Warren won this debate marginally over Bill de Blasio, number 2. Julian Castro in 3rd place, Cory Booker with a solid showing in 4th place. I believe Klobuchar, Gabbard, and Inslee were basically tied for 5th place. Neither of them really factors. I believe Tim Ryan and Delaney were tied for 8th place, doing damage to themselves. And lastly, I think Beto O'Rourke was 10th out of 10, really doing damage to his campaign. It was very, very bad. Night 2 tonight. Join me live on YouTube at 8:30 p.m. Eastern for the live stream and commentary, assuming we are not banned from live streaming on YouTube.